Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're doing good, by the way. And this is a special conversation that we're about to have. We're going to be embarking on together. I'm grateful you've joined us for it. Today, it's a true jazz master. He is a musician I've admired for a long, long time, seen him live in concert. His legendary career spans decades, styles, eras. Countless fashions have come and gone while he remains. He's won 9 Grammys. He's a recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts' highest honor in jazz, the 2013 NEA Jazz Masters. That puts him in a distinction shared by Dizzy Gillespie, Count Basie, Ella, Herbie Hancock, some real monsters. He's headed here for a multi-island tour of both master classes and concerts. It'll be October 3rd and 4th in Hilo, October 5th at the MAC, October 6th, Manoa, the 2012 Manoa Jazz and Heritage Festival. He'll be playing live with the Brian Lynch Quartet, and it's a real honor to welcome to the show the great salsa, Latin jazz pianist, songwriter, performer, national treasure, I might add, Eddie Palmieri. Aloha and mahalo, my brother. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, Dave, after that introduction, I'm just going to say goodbye, and I'll see you in Hawaii. That was great.
What's going on, brother?
Oh, Lord, here. What I got here is sand. Plenty of sand.
Where are you at?
Vegas. You know the story about the sergeant that had his men? And he says, man, I have good news and bad news for you. We have to fill up 10,000 bags of sand. And everybody, wow, and it's hot in the city. The good news is there's plenty of sand. Do you see what I mean, Dave?
I do, brother.
But anyway, I can't wait to get to Hawaii, really.
Well, I'm giving you...
thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
You know, yeah, and the quartet is quite unique. It's the Eddie Palmieri, Brian Lynch Quartet. We recorded together. You know that we did an album I did for Brian, and he won a Grammy, and I was very, very happy for him. But it's an extraordinary quartet. We have the drummer called Daphnis Prieto from Cuba, who just got the Genius Award, by the way. Amazing. We're very happy for him. And we have a young bassist called Mr. Lucas Curtis, who is really, in my opinion, my best bass player that I've ever had that comprehends my playing. He's truly outstanding. And he has his own band also with his brother Sakai, another great pianist, and another brother, Damien. So it's a musical family. He'll be playing bass. And then Mr. Brian Lynch on trumpet, who's been with me now for 2 centuries. And he looks great.
I bet he does. You look great, too.
200 years old. He looks great. Amazing. And we're going to go and have a wonderful time in Hawaii. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
You are quite welcome. And when you talk about that great lineup, I'm thinking of, you mentioned that record. In addition to that Grammy Award-winning record you did with Brian, what other sort of repertoire can folks expect to hear when you guys play live?
Well, we'll play a little bit from each composition, certain compositions starting from Palmas that we started when we did my first recording into Latin jazz, which we had Brian Lynch, Conrad Erwick on trombone, the great Conrad, who's my compadre. I baptized his oldest son, Glenn, and Mr. Donald Harrison, Chief Donald Harrison, the great alto man from New Orleans. And that we did 3 CDs. We did Palmas, Arete, and Vortex. So from each of those, we have a compositions, plus what we do, other compositions that we have thrown in. It's a very exciting presentation. And every composition is going to excite because each composition contains what I call, and I learned scientifically after I learned it intuitively by listening to the great Cuban recordings starting in the 60s, starting in the 50s, 56 on to the 60s. I learned it scientifically with a teacher called Bob Bianco. When I studied some Schillinger, the Joseph Schillinger system of music, which the Berklee School of Music was called the Schillinger House in Boston originally. It's called tension and resistance in the composition. And that happens when you put the rhythm section in a primary position, like a conga solo, a bongo solo, timbal solo, after a piano solo, a bass solo. That creates tension and resistance that leads to an exciting musical climax. And Dave, we do that in every competition. It's going to be exciting. Whether I do it with the octet, septet, or the big band of 13 men that I travel all over Europe this year, or the quartet, it's in there.
I love that. So you're basically saying, so when you put the those percussive instruments into a primary spot and let them solo as if they were the piano or a horn or something, that is a tension building device. Is that
exactly? But what happens is within the competition, when you have the jazz musicians, then there's different chordal functions within the competition that is certainly complementary to the jazz player, no? But within that competition, eventually I'm going to get to a point in that competition, which is in those recordings, that now I bring the rhythm section from out of a secondary position of accompaniment to a primary position of soloing. And that means that the chordal changes between the bass and I simplify, so we have what we call synchronization. In Spanish, it's called masacote. It's the synchronization that we need, and the less chordal changes we have in Latin music, the more that happens, we can gel. And while he's soloing, then that's building up that tension and resistance. And then comes the horns, whether it's one horn or whatever, and that brings in the high climax, the musical climax that's going to excite.
That's just another example of less is more, is what you're saying.
Excuse me?
It's another example of the principle less is more.
Exactly. But knowing where to use the change and put that rhythmical pattern, that rhythmical section, in primary position is knowing the rhythmical patterns. The more you know the rhythmical patterns, the more you're able to do that. And that doesn't take away from any of the Latin jazz that has been recorded. But the Latin jazz that I'm talking about is with the Latin jazz rhythm section. You have Latin jazz, and then we have what we call jazz Latin, to me, when you have like a drummer and then a conga player next to him, and then they're playing the Latin rhythm. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that rhythm section that goes into a dance band. I run that like a dance orchestra, and that doesn't fail. It's always going to excite.
I like the amount of thought that's put into hitting the right vibe, because that's really, when you go to see you, it has it has this organic feel. It has that smoky,
exactly.
Kind of vibration. But it's nice because you said, and I want you to explain it a little bit more, you first knew a lot of this stuff intuitively, but then you learned it scientifically. Right.
And that comes from like exciters. Exciters would be sex and danger to the organism. The reaction of the human reaction to that would be love and fear. That's what you have in the competitions. And I learned that from Schillinger. Joseph Schillinger was a Russian scientist, mathematician that wrote 12 books in 2 volumes. Theory of rhythm, theory of pitch scales, and down the line. All right? And then his masterpiece, which was called The Mathematical Basis of the Arts. And I was so fortunate to learn that whatever I was able to comprehend of the system, I learned from Mr. Bob Bianco that I went to study jazz harmonics, or jazz harmony, and he helped me so much. And plus, we were very dear friends. I studied with him for about 20 years. The Manhattan Transit, as a matter of fact, was students of his also, and I miss him dearly. But he took me into another world, and he also gave me the 4 criteria, which I live by, which is he who knows not and knows he knows not can be helped. He who knows not and thinks he knows is a muddlehead, and we have a problem here. Then he would put me in the 3rd one, my teacher. He who knows and knows not that he knows. And the last one is, he who knows and knows that he knows is wisdom. And very few humans fall into that category. But if there's any iota of wisdom that I have, is that I don't guess I'm going to excite you with my music. I know it.
I love that. Talking to you, it reminds me of standing. I went to school at Emerson, so it reminds me of standing right around the corner there at Berklee College of Music, when all those guys would stand around and just talk about music theory and stuff.
Where in Boston?
Yeah, I went to Emerson. It was right around the college.
Well, Berkeley was known as the Schilling House.
Right.
And then when he died, the Professor George Gershwin studied with him. Many of the great writers from Hollywood studied with him. The mathematical scoring is there's no guesswork. For example, he who might know music, if I ask him how many scales are there, for example, you should see all the incredible answers I get. 100, 12, thousands.
Wow.
There's exactly 13,313 scales. Dyads, triads, and Schillinger has them in 4 categories. And it's extraordinary. 1 root tone, 1 octave, 1 root tone, 2 octaves, 2 root tones, 2 octaves. I mean, unbelievable what he came up with. So it's extraordinary what I was able to learn and what we call unbalancing axes. Unbalancing axes are characteristics of openings. How do you excite? Like say when you want to hear an exciting orchestra, you listen to the Count Basie band. The way they wrote intuitively, they knew how to excite and get the audience. Any note that goes away from the primary position of a note is going to excite. So if you got a middle C, for example, any note that goes away from that middle C, the middle C would be the note that is mostly in that composition, that repeats itself within that composition. Any note that goes away from that is certainly going to excite you. You use that in solos, you use that in introductions, and I love to do that in codas. Unbalancing action. You have to surrender to the gravitational pull of the earth, but I fight it. Instead of being a simple coda, I use a lot of upbeats like 1, 2, 3, 4, pow, 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 and those kind of shouts to excite the coda. And all that came from studying with Mr. Bob Bianco, and plus he taught me about political economy. He was a great teacher.
When I hear the way you're so obviously geared to teach, by the way that you've learned so many things, and part of your trip here is in fact masterclass possibilities for folks. Explain what those are going to entail and who that would be a good experience for.
Well, I'll give you an example. When I sit down with the classes, which I'll have probably Daptis and I'll have Brian Lynch with me whenever we talk to the students, But I'll give them a great example. I walked into my teacher's office, his home, his apartment in Queens, and I said, Bob, his name was Bob Bianco. He played guitar, and his favorite pianist was Lenny Tristano. His favorite orchestra was Stan Kenton.
Wow.
Because of the way he gave a lot of the young great players opportunity to write for the band, the orchestra. Okay. And I told him, Bob, I'm through, Bob. My creativity. There's nothing nothing's happening. It's really like I'm in a rut. And he goes, really? I could write 1,000 compositions a day. I said, oh, come on, Bob, come on. He goes, yeah, you got a yellow page book? I said, a yellow page book. Numbers take you where the mind would not take you in seconds. If I ask for 7 numbers, and they all have to be distinct numbers, in other words, not a 2, 3, 3, it would have to be 2, 3, 4, all different numbers. Using C as an zero extension, if I say 2, you're going to go up 2 semitones. That's D already. Wherever you land, that becomes zero extension again. So if I go from C, zero extension, I say 2, that's a D. If I say 3 from D, which is zero extension, now you have D sharp, E natural, F. So right there in those 2 numbers, I got 2 notes, D and F. I could change that from a D minor to an F minor, from a D7 to an F7. I could give that, in other words, it's called metallization of harmonic structure. Usually, we write a melody and then we write harmony to it. Is that correct?
Right. I'm getting you.
Okay. I'm telling you that I'm going to give you 7 chordal structures in ascending if, for any reason, one note occurs of one you had already. Schillinger says, raise it a half a tone. So you could have 7 different notes. By the time I finish, I have 7 notes. I change that into 7 chordal structures, 7 chords, ascending. But suppose I use the same formula, descending. C would be 0 extension. If I say 2, I'm going to be talking about B flat. Is that correct?
Right, if you were going down, yep.
That's descending. Now, instead of D natural, when I went up, I got B flat. And when I say 3, that would be now a G, descending. You have A natural, A flat, and then G. So by the time I finish that cycle, I got 14 chords. And with those 14 chords, you put them in a voice leading type effect. And you change them into any chordal structure you want, and now you write melodies to that. I did that in seconds. I didn't care how I felt. I could have had a hangover. I could have had pain in my back, knee aching, my hands, whatever. And I'm going to create, in seconds, 14 chords that I'm going to be able to work with and derive, and gives me a head start into writing something different, something unique, and I did it in seconds. Numbers took me where the mind couldn't take me, and I learned that also. It's an extraordinary lesson to give the students.
Now, I totally got what you were saying. So basically, you take this formula based on numbers so that that phone book literally then has billions of combinations in it, because you just take any random number out of that, transcribe it into the series of notes in either direction that... It's
notes first, then chordal structures that I want, whatever chordal structures I want. Right. And what the essence is then mathematics becomes, mathematics is the soul of music. Music becomes mathematic. In other words, you can't if music makes you feel that it's alive, which we talked about organic, if it makes you feel it's alive, if it follow the Fibonacci series of 1, 3, then 1, 2, 3, that's 5, then 5 and 8. 5 and 5, it gives you an 8. It just keeps going. It's like the way a leaf grows. These are all summation series. These are all numbers. It's organic growth in music. Music makes you feel that it's alive because it has movement. If it has movement, it must have mathematical applications like all the arts. Schillinger wrote 12 books in 2 volumes, and then his masterpiece was the mathematical basis of all the arts. Imagine what the Mona Lisa would look. It looked like Goofy and Donald Duck or whatever it is. If they wouldn't have had, if Leonardo da Vinci didn't know about, mathematical structures. Would you correct? Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, and I know about the Fibonacci sequence. You got a good.
Yeah. So all that helped me tremendously in my work, in my competitions, in what they call unbalancing axes. Which is characteristics of openings. Balancing axes, it's like when you look at a primary position of a note, the primary axis is the note that is most repeated in a composition. Again, let's say it's C. Any note that goes away from C is going to excite. The Count Basie band did it, intuitively and that, or whatever they had, scientifically, whatever they studied. But that's one of the great examples of a band, how they make subtle, and then you hear, that's going to get you out of your chair whether you like them or not. So these are called unbalancing axes. And all that helped me in what I present, my music, so I don't guess I'm going to excite you with my orchestra. I know it.
You're bringing it. No, I like that. Well, when you did the records with Tito Puente, like Masterpiece, what did you learn from a master like that you're using as well?
Well, I learned what I always knew, that he was the great bandstand warrior that we've ever had. Tito Puente was no joke on stage, and he was a great vibist also, and a great arranger, and a great showman. I mean, Tito Puente was quite unique. My brother Charlie played with him for 2 or 3 years, recorded on piano with him some masterpiece small groups with like George Shearing type vibes and piano. Only my brother could do that. My brother was my influence, main influence. And then when I started to make my band through Barry Rogers, the great trombonist that passed away, that's how I met Bob Bianco. And then I studied with Bob, and then he took me into also political economy, which I went through the Henry George course, which is a book that he wrote called Progress and Poverty, which tells us about the conditions that we're in constantly.
Yeah, you've learned some amazing stuff and gotten to work with people who are really, who are some of your most important folks that you think influenced you musically that years later you were able to meet and work with, even if you just got to meet them and didn't record with them, but just people that really made an important mark on you as an influence?
Well, I have to start with my brother. He was 9 years older than I, and really, he was the pianist. I was really the piano player.
I get it. Right.
And then I met Thelonious Monk. He came to hear the band once, and he was certainly an influence. Art Tatum, Bill Evans, one of my favorite. Bud Powell, which I saw in person with my brother. I saw the John Coltrane original quartet in the Birdland with Barry Rogers, who told me, I want you to hear something, let me know your opinion. Jimmy Garrison, McCoy Tyner, the drummer, what's his name?
Elvin Jones,
excuse me, and McCoy and John Coltrane on a Sunday, and it was really empty, the place, and now he sits down, and after he solos, the great solo, I guess he was figuring out the payroll or something, and McCoy took a solo and just kept soloing for maybe 20 minutes or something like that. And now when John Coltrane picks up his horn, he disappears, and he goes in front, in the back. Berlin had a pillar, so you couldn't see where he was going, and he went right in front of Elvin Jones, and now you could hear that. You can't see it, but you could hear the sax all over the place. So I was very fortunate who I was able to see. And when I played as a young man, I actually saw Charlie Parker play. At 15, I didn't know who they were. Charlie Ventura. I was always weaned in the Latin field. I wanted to be a Latin orchestra leader. And my brother was with Tito Puente, and then eventually I played with Vicentico Valdez, that was Tito Puente's singer, Cuban, and I played with him for 2 years, from 56 to 58. Then I went with Tito Rodriguez, which was the rival of Tito Puente for many years. He was another great artist. He was a singer, but had always a great conjunto band, which meant 3 trumpets and then the rhythm section, timbales, conga, bongo, piano, bass, Tito singing. The only big band that we had actually was the great Machito Orchestra that had 5 saxes and 4 trumpets or 3 trumpets. But the great genius was Rene Hernandez, the Cuban pianist, composer, arranger, that when he came in from Cuba, the Machito Orchestra went into another level and then stood there until Rene left the band, went to Puerto Rico, then wrote for Tito Rodriguez on a TV show in Puerto Rico and other things. He wrote my first album. He also made arrangements for me. One that I did, a white album that Gio Feliciano sings. He did one for all the woodwinds, 3 violoncellos, 4 trumpets, 5 saxes. I mean, he was a genius, Rene Hernandez. And so those years, I was always wanted to be an orchestra leader, Latin. So then by 1956, I was made aware of all the Cuban bands that were coming out of Cuba by one of the percussionists, Mr. Manny Oquendo. Manny Oquendo was a great bongo player, and with Tito Puente, then with Tito Rodriguez recorded. And then when I made my band, he came and played with me, played bongo and timbales in 1962. And then he stood on and off until the band broke up in 68. Then he became his own leader for Conjunto Libre. But he was very influential for me, getting me to learn all the Cuban orchestras and all the Cuban piano players that I used as teachers and that. And by listening to all of them in the jazz, I got into jazz later, and by listening to all of them, though, I was able to come up with my own signature of playing, and helped me tremendously, and I can't thank them enough, because they were geniuses that I have a lot of the recordings that from the jazz, and then certainly Miles Davis, which I met and knew, and we closed the show for him in Montreux, Switzerland. Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea, Mr. Bobby Timmons, which wrote Moaning. He used to come to the Village Gate. Dr. Billy Taylor, that we shared the bandstand when he played with me. Mr. McCoy Tyner, a mentor of mine. So all of that put together, I've been very blessed in my life that I've met them, that I've been able to play with them, and then bass players like Christian McBride. Also, I recorded with him. Donald Harrison, who recorded one of my compositions with Christian. Then I did a duo with Christian and a special album that he did. So all of that, Dave, helped me tremendously in my way of getting what we call, and it's very important to have your own personal signature. Donald Harrison, the great alto man from New Orleans, he's the chief, of these African tribes that his father left him because his father had 7 tribes. And after he passed away, Donald now handles 2 or 3 from Mardi Gras. He puts on the Indian headgear and the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
He told me, Eddie, when I finally heard, because he worked with us, he was with Brian Lynch. They did the Jazz Messengers also for a few years. But he told me, you solo like a drummer. And that's because I was always a frustrated drummer. I wanted to be my brother's drummer until my brother told me, if you want to be a drummer, you got to learn all the drums. And at that time, you didn't come with just your sticks and your hi-hat or your cymbal. You had to carry all the drums. And I looked at that, and I saw myself with hernias all over. I said, well, that's the end of that. I went back to the piano.
Well, it is a percussion instrument anyway, at least.
That's right. Why? Because the hammer hits the strings.
Exactly, my brother. Now, I got to wonder, all that musical knowledge and experience has led to 9 Grammys, right? Do I have it right, or am I missing? All right, so I've always been wondering.
But let me put it this way. I appreciate what you're saying about all that, but I'm the only one that really knows that I do not know. I'm going to use the Socratic method on that. That's when they asked Socrates, you who is the most brilliant mind, he says, what is it that, he said, well, I really know that I do not know.
My question is, my brother, because it's such an I'm proud of you because I love your music and have these and great moments and memories of sitting there thinking while your music plays. But I think of, if I was you, I would be proud of having achieved them. And my question would be like, are they all together on a wall? Where are they? Kind of describe what you've done with that collection of honors.
Oh, well, we have the 9 Grammys that I have a nephew that told me, hey, Unc, you need another one for the other thumb. So I have 9, and I've been nominated about 14 times. And you got to remember that I won the first one. Remember that he put our category into NARAS. It took 17 years to put us in category, and that was in 1975. So in 1975, only 1 Grammy was given for the whole genre of Latin music and all the Latin artists in the world. And there was only 1 in 75 and 1 in 76, and I won them both. And I've been very blessed, and it's always been an honor. And to take the music to the International Bandstand has been my stimuli. So
I'm saying, are they all together on a wall? Do you have them?
Well, we have them. Yeah, we have it in a break front, the Grammys, and that, and but one of the most treasured things I have are 2 little Hawaiian dances. One with a left hand broken, and I was in the Palladium Ballroom, and coming out of the men's room, gonna go play a set, and I met an Afro-American brother coming into the bathroom, and he stopped me for a minute. He said, "Eddie Palmieri." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I got to tell you, man, how I love your music, what your music has done for us. All my brothers. I just came from Vietnam, and you have no idea that we listened to your music in Vietnam, and I just came home, and I said, oh, thank God you got home safe and alive, because you lost a lot of your brothers and a lot of your dear friends, and I wish I had something to give you to show you how I appreciate your music in my heart and what you've done for all of us. When we needed to hear something, we played your records. But the only thing I have is these 2 Hawaiian dances that I carried in Nam, and I'd like to give it to you as a gift. I treasure that more than anything I have.
Man, what and he had, his connection to Hawaii was what? He just had him on him? Was he from Hawaii, or?
No. He had these 2 little Hawaiian dances, and he had them, it took him throughout his whole
tours of duty.
Tour of in Vietnam, and he got home alive. And he said, I carried them in Nam, and I would like to give them to you to thank you for your music and what you did for all of us in Nam, listening to your music. And I treasure that. I mean, you have no idea.
No, I hear you, brother. I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Well, that's a good note to end on. I give you a big hug. I hope that this was not a hassle doing this today. I really am.
No, man, are you kidding? It was a great, man, and you were great questions, and I wish you the very best. I want to meet you when I get there, right?
You bet. We'll figure something out and get together when you're in town.
I'd love to do it. Okay, thank you, Dave.
You be safe, brother.
A warm embrace.
Big aloha. See you soon.
Aloha.